Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Andrew Freeman tēnei. Welcome everybody to the second CLG for Martinborough and Greytown wastewater. Before we get underway, it'd be great to hear from you, Adam, to begin with an opening karakia.
Yep, happy to do so. Let's get it in front of me. Whakataka tahau ki te uru, whakataka tahau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā tara ki tai, kia he ake ana te atakura, he tio, he hoka, he hau, hu, tihei mauri ora.
Good, thank you. So moving into our a meeting, I'd just like to begin, given we've got some new faces here, a very brief refresher just on the CLG with its expectations and purpose. Just a reminder to everyone that the key focus of this is engagement. It's enhancing communication, which supports the consent structure and effectively the mandate that sits around Wellington Water and connecting the South Wairarapa District Council and the Regional Council and the community. Our probably primary goal here is to help clarify information and remove assumptions, so to air and hear anything odd, or to help raise issues or questions, but not necessarily if they're new items that haven't been expected, that it puts those clearly on the agenda, and then there'd be an expectation that things are followed up in the following meeting. But it's as far as possible to share information, tidy up assumptions, and build better understanding within the community. Very simple ground rules, which you'd expect everywhere: show respect for each other, all trying to be prepared and keep on time, not interrupting allocated speakers, but we will make room for questions. Everyone have your devices on silent, and where possible, a group this size stay on mute and unmute to speak. Do take opportunities though when you have questions to ask clarifying questions first, and then perhaps proceed from that if you don't get the information that you require. But we'll have a spirit of that, that the goal here is to clarify understandings, and that's where we come from with questions. Participation is via invitation only, but I know there's a inclusive purpose here, so that anyone who you thought should be added into the group, email Rory and they will endeavour to include them. But it's just to keep it from ballooning into some massive Zoom meeting, which is really frustrating for all. And if interest is really high, then we would consider what medium would be appropriate to host it. So I feel pretty much you want everyone on the screen, or Zoom calls become quite difficult. And sharing of content, a reminder, this is recorded, and the link ends up on the SWDC YouTube channel. So just bear that in mind, I guess, in terms of how we conduct ourselves. And yeah, just a reminder again to stay constructive and solution focused. I'd like to begin, I suppose, first, just any questions about those basic ground rules or the expectations and purpose, or anything that needs clarifying. Oh, cool. And in terms of questions through the chair, and the way to do that, either literally visually raise a hand, or use if you prefer the reactions, raise a hand on the screen. And that's pretty good for teeing up questions, just to show that you've got a question to come for a speaker without interrupting the flow, but to make sure that you do get heard. A very brief cover of the last CLG meeting. I felt it was a positive start for the CLG, very much getting it back underway, which is a requirement of the consent, but also really important for a know of how South Wairau District Council and Wellington Water are aiming to engage with community. There were good constructive conversations following the information sharing, and some exploration of the kind of the challenges between operational aspects of wastewater and the constraints that they operate under. I guess one of the keen interest there was in monitoring and access to information and data, which was raised a number of times, which I understand will just clarify that during this meeting. It was noted the potential for educational roles for the CLG, potentially around things that would actually help Wellington Water do their job better, and the crossover back to the community, that it's a that there is a shared responsibility there from the users and the operational people. One example is wet wipes. But overall, yeah, I think Rory summed it up well. It was a great opportunity to capture some community feedback on key issues and keep the dialogue open. Is there anything other people that were at the meeting, anything key that they feel was important to highlight in terms of summary from the last meeting? And so kind of matters arising specifically.
Sorry, Andrew, I'm too slow to use the emoticons, so I'll do it manually. But I think the one thing I'm just wondering is, are there any of representatives of Mana Whenua in attendance?
Doesn't look like it, Mel.
Yeah, I think that's probably quite a, whether there was a pressure point or maybe even just an understanding of potentially why they might not be here, might be worthwhile.
Yeah, no, that's Mel. I can come in there. Yeah, certainly invites went out and I can confirm those. But yeah, absolutely, we can look into that. Yeah, thanks for raising that.
Yeah, we certainly had some keen questions from some of the community around the Papuai marae last time.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Mel. Anything else, any other specific points to note at this point? So in terms of matters arising, I guess one kind of key theme that came up was the request for monitoring and access to data and live data, which was discussed in the meeting and was kind of parked to some extent as a follow-up of what might the regional council or Wellington Water or SWDC be able to do to enhance that or enhance access to the data that is being gathered. Rory, who do you thought was the best to address that?
So Aaron from Greater Wellington, you did mention the possibility of speaking to the environmental science team around, you know, potential sharing of useful information or website links, that kind of thing. And possibly I think Stefan from South Wairau District Council had mentioned some useful links as well in the last CLG. But Aaron, did you manage to get any further on from your perspective on sharing any of that data?
Yep, so I'll just pass over to Ben if that's okay. He did some digging on that.
Excellent.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Basically, it is as we spoke about in the last meeting. Everything, all the information that we have is available on the website. It's pretty easy to find as well. If you just go to the Greater Wellington Regional Council website and you go to environment, which is at the top, and then you click on freshwater, all the information about the monitoring that we do is all there available. There's also a link to the LAWA website, which is Land, Air, Water, Aotearoa, which basically tells you alerts about swimming quality. I also spoke to the science team here. They're a very small team. There's about 3 of them that do monitoring in the region. There's a monthly monitoring program at particular points in the Ruamahanga catchment, and that data, as far as I know, is freely available on the website, and I can forward some links to that information if anybody's really interested in it. In terms, I think the way the question was framed in the last meeting, they were driving towards the idea that there'd be some sort of live update from us as to incidents and water quality measurements that happen, and that's not something that we're resourced to do, and frankly that's not really possible with the number of staff and the money that we have. There is obviously a lot of onus on Wellington Water and South Wairarapa to do reporting via the consent should there be a particular incident with the plant. I don't want to get into too much detail about that, but it's all laid out in the different schedules of the consent, and obviously it's our job basically to watch over that, and if it's seen that something happened at the plant and a notification should have been made and that hasn't happened, obviously we would follow that up. But that's about it, really. As I say, it's all available on the website. I think Stefan kindly pointed that out last time. There is a lot of information there. But as I say, it's a small team. We do have a very large data set that runs over a very long period of time. So the overall quality of the catchment is being monitored. But as I say, in certain places it's done monthly. In other places there's annual sampling that's done. And occasionally, when it's a project, I'm told that they put in automatic sensors too, which provide certain amounts of data, but where those are is not necessarily consistent because they may be investigating a particular river or creek or stretch of river, so they only go in for a year or maybe 6 months, and then they're taken out and placed somewhere else. Okay.
Thanks, Ben. So it's really, there isn't any, if people follow the leads through the website, they'll actually have access to all the data that is publicly available, can be accessed through those, following your nose there.
Absolutely, it's pretty straightforward. There's actually a section in Freshwater called our monitoring program. It's also got some links to some contact details, so you could get hold of the team if you've got any more questions, particularly about that. But as I say, I don't know precisely, and I didn't really have time to find out today what data precisely is made publicly available. If it's ongoing data and it hasn't been checked and cleaned up, etc., it may not be available, but I think there is quite a lot there, and certainly the LAWA website will tell you all about whether you can swim there, and there's a good explanation of how they work out whether or not it's a good place to swim. They use a risk model, which is a whole load of scientific modelling to try and predict where there are going to be issues.
Thanks, Ben. And Aaron, from the Greater Wellington Regional Council, you've got a couple of add-ons to that.
So Ben is from Greater Wellington.
Oh, sorry. Yep. That's fine. You were mentioning some other links there.
Yes, so I've just put up the links that Ben mentioned. So obviously the Freshwater has more of a summary and sort of explains the situation in more detail, but the graphs has the live data so that you can look at exactly where that data is coming from and go back through time, essentially by months, or you can expand the range and look for several years. The other thing I would add to that, sorry, just to interrupt quickly, I think that, you know, if there are issues or anything is noted, that it's important that that's brought to our attention. So if, you know, in the cases of pollution incidents or poor water quality, we are interested in that, and that is something that we actively respond to as part of our incident response, our pollution response team. So that's Ben's team. We encourage people to let us know if they do notice poor water quality or any kind of incident.
And Adam, Wellington Water.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, sorry, I thought I'd just jump in. Kia ora, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name's Adam. I'm the program delivery lead, looking after the South Wairarapa Capital Program. But I'm just trying to remember, and I don't actually have the exact minutes from last time there, because I know there was a query as well. And I'll just jump in here because there was a query around like cultural monitoring as well. Is that outlined on that link as well, Ben or Aaron?
There's a tangata whanau operation plan is part of the consent. I think there was a bit of difficulty at the time the consent was written in getting that developed. Iwi were invited to, be a part of the process of writing that plan. People at South Y and Wellington Water may know better than me, but there wasn't much of a response. So I don't know if that plan is particularly well developed, and I wouldn't have thought at the time it was thought that there'd be a very proactive reporting line to iwi interested parties regarding those sorts of things. I think I'm safe in saying that GW doesn't necessarily, as far as I know, do cultural monitoring in that way. I don't think those lines of communication are maybe as open and as good as they could be. And that would be something that I'm sure everybody here would be keen to develop moving forward. But as Aaron says, we've got plenty of lines of communication open if anybody wants to report some sort of incident or problem. And obviously that would include any cultural issue that might have come up through others using the waterway in a particular manner.
I just wasn't sure if there was something driven out of like the Mahanga Whaitua or anything like that for just a regular monitoring rather than treatment plant specific. But
yeah, I mean, you could well be right, Adam. I just haven't looked into that particular detail. I know that those conversations and links are there, but as for actual updated reoccurring monitoring, I don't know what happens, to be honest with you.
Okay, thanks. That's good clarification. And the other kind of major item that came up during the last meeting was the kind of inquiry around timelines for engagement for future projects, especially Papawai, which I'm not signaling that we go into here, but I guess whether in terms of follow-up, are there any more advances in terms of timelines or how that's tracking into 2023? And mindful here as well of Stefan's comment at the end of the meeting, which is that the CLG's role is engagement, sharing information, and there's very much a South Wairarapa District Council led process around decision making for future infrastructure. So I guess just checking in on that kind of ongoing issue and need around timelines. So it looks like Amy's got her hand up there. Thanks, Amy.
Yeah, well, I will just have an update at the next CLG, I think, about the progress we've made on that second stage, particularly at Greytown. Yeah. Okay,
excellent. Right. So they were the kind of matters arising that stood out from my perspective. Is there anything else, looking around the group from who was here at the last meeting that they feel is also relevant to raise at this point, given we have got a fair bit of input coming from Wellington Water in particular?
I think that's pretty much it, Andrew. We have, just for particularly Louise, I think in terms of conversation from last meeting, is the Featherston wastewater treatment plant is going through a reconsenting project at the moment. So that's got a separate sort of range of community engagement activities, including one coming out on the 26th of November. So that's being treated a bit separately to this this particular CLG, and so potentially down the line that might form a separate CLG or even form into this one. But at this stage, it's been sort of treated separately on that reconsenting project. But just to fill people, and particularly Louise, in on the background there.
No, thank you. I've actually received that from actually, Stefan. So
Great.
Featherston. So I do see that it's going a separate path. So yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you, Rory. And also just note that Rory did put out a request around all attendees of whether they had questions they would like to send in advance to sort of table at the start, but I don't think there were anything in particular. So given that's in mind, we might move on to Amy with the kind of substance of this CLG, which is beginning with a high-level summary, I guess, of the 2021, 2022 and the where to next.
Okay, what I'll do here, Andrew, is I'm just going to share my screen, and Amy, if you can just let me know when you want me to move slides, that'd be probably the easiest way to do it.
Okay.
Is everyone seeing my slides okay there?
Yep, that's great. And also just a reminder, if anyone hasn't seen that, just click in and out of the chat at the bottom. Aaron has helpfully put up a bunch of links there regarding monitoring as well, which I'm sure will also be captured in the minutes.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Okay. So sorry, just moving to Amy's bit here. Yeah.
Can you full screen it, Rory?
Yeah, let me have a look. That should
Graham,
be.
what's the name of this agenda item that we're doing now, please?
Oh, sorry. So I guess because the first two or three kind of move together. So we're down to the 2021/2022 annual resource consent reports.
Excellent. Thank
and
you.
Matamra wastewater treatment plant abatement notice.
Oh, doing the first one and then the second one, is that right?
Yeah, and then that'll be followed by the irrigation season
Excellent.
update.
Thank you.
It looks like Aaron's got his hand up.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
I was just going to give you some instructions there, Rory, if you could.
Yeah, that'd be useful. Thanks, Aaron.
Display settings. Hit display settings
Yeah.
at the top, and you need the swap presenter view.
There we go. Thanks a lot, Aaron. Appreciate that.
It's always tricky. Right, so annual compliance reports, what the resource consents require us to do is at the end of each year, which is the period 1 July 2021 to 30th of June 2022, is to submit a compliance report. And that is, I'm sorry, I've got a bit of background noise probably. That compliance report just goes through each of the consent conditions one by one and assesses whether the plants are compliant with that consent condition. As you probably expect, based on what we told you at the last CLG, there are a range of non-compliances at each treatment plant. So I don't think we want to go through them one by one tonight, but the sort of the treated effluent quality consent non-compliances sort of relate mostly to ammonia effluent quality and at both Greytown and Martinborough. And at Martinborough, we've got some E. coli non-compliances and also hydraulic application rate non-compliance for our land discharge activity. So really the non-compliances are probably what we expect given what we know about the performance of the plants and the work that we need to do to upgrade them to be compliant. So we are working to address some of these non-compliances within our existing operational and capital renewal budgets within this next reporting period, which is 1 July 22 to 30 June 23. But what's happening concurrently with that is that Greater Wellington Regional Council, we submit our compliance reports to them, the Greater Wellington officers review them and prepare a compliance rating report, which is I guess it just summarises what they think of the compliance report. So does anyone have any questions about that?
Yeah. I don't know, it's probably a bit sticky of me to raise this, but according to the consent, everybody in the CLG should be given a copy of the annual compliance.
Yes, sorry, and I believe that they were forwarded on the 10th of October.
Is that right?
That's what I read in an email today somewhere.
Excellent.
Yes, I've
Cool.
read that as well, Amy.
So I just wanted to check that everybody had got it, basically.
I probably wouldn't have gone in because I wouldn't have.
True.
Yeah, well, I was going to say I'm not super upset about it because I know that we were just starting up this group again at that kind of time, and I didn't know if everybody would have got it because I think we've got some new faces here today and things have changed a little bit here and there.
It's a good point though, Ben. Just that context is people, should have all the CLG members. Maybe Louise might have missed that, but being new from the last meeting. But it's everyone should have this report. It's quite detailed, but the idea here is that we're going through this and at a high level, Amy is, and then we can sort of bring up key themes and that kind of thing. But I can look to add Louise to that list as well. And but no, good point, Ben. Amy, feel free to carry on. Andrew, unless you have any other things to add there.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. I was just saying I personally found that kind of traffic light system about halfway through that kind of rates the things in terms of seriousness is really helpful for context to then reread the report. So probably if anyone hasn't read it, that's pretty helpful layout. I'd probably read that first. Anything else, Ben, in terms of reading those reports, or Amy?
I'd say they are probably quite technical. I know that Aaron spends a good deal of his time in the detail of those. Not much else really to add other than there's only one kind of half of the story. Obviously, this is what Wellington Water put forward in terms of their, well, I don't want to say opinion because it's probably a bit more grounded than that, of where they're at with the consent and how compliant it is. And then obviously Aaron, myself and the team, we will study it very carefully. And the more technical aspects of it, we obviously use very technical consultants to check things that have been said and trends in the data. And the second half, if you like, of the story is the compliance rating report that we produce. And then that will complete the cycle. And that's where we decide what we're going to do moving forward over the next year.
Any comment from Stefan from the district council perspective?
No, thank you. No, we're working closely with Wellington Water on the advice that's going through to GW and trying to connect with our elected members on the fiscal implication of this, including for rates, trying to squeeze as much as we can out of our budget to achieve the level of compliance needed. Bearing in mind that is very, very difficult.
And in terms of it's perhaps someone from Wellington Water or probably to very broad context in terms of is there any extra layers of context you can add on a very surface level to kind of help the group kind of make sense of those reports? In terms of, because we're looking at quite a wide period, 1st of July 2020 to August 2022.
I suppose that's how we measure our compliance in terms of mainly the effluent quality is a number of the compliance values of a number of exceedances are permitted per year. So that's our compliance reporting period. And there's probably like a range of non-compliances. So some would be like we don't visit, our operators aren't resourced to visit the site each day, but that's technically a non-compliance. But then there's the effluent non-compliances, which they're the ones that have an environmental effect, and those are the ones that we want to address with upgrading these plants. We need to address. So
And are they, is there a link to, or how close a link even in broad terms is it to heavy rainfall events and things like winter?
Yeah, so different non-compliances are caused by different reasons. That's, I mean, if anyone's got any specific questions about, a certain part of the non-compliance, I'd be welcome to email me. It's probably easier to, if someone's got a specific question when they've had a chance to look through the annual report.
And Adam, comment to me.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and obviously I can't talk too much for the specifics around the actual compliance of the reports, but if you asked the question there, Andrew, around sort of a higher level and sort of understanding what does all this mean, and I guess this is one way of measuring the performance of the wastewater treatment plants, but and I wouldn't want to steal Martin Grombach, I believe he's online, his thunder here, but we also raise we have raise and discuss with South Wairarapa around it's one thing to be compliant, it's another thing to be resilient, and that's another layer of improving the operability of the treatment plant. So I guess in this sense we're kind of just talking on a real basic compliance level, and there's potentially, as you look to improve the performance of your treatment plants, there's a resilience aspect to it as well. So probably can't talk too much more to that, but just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Back to you, Amy. Anything else that you wanted to cover on that item of the agenda?
Not for me. If we can move on to the next slide, please.
Yeah.
Great. So since we last had the CLG, last CLG meeting, the Martinborough wastewater treatment plant was issued an abatement notice by Greater Wellington Regional Council. So it was based on breaches of resource consent conditions between the 1st of July 2020 to the 1st of August 2022. So the breaches were related to exceeding the daily volume and instantaneous discharge rate to water, nutrient discharge limits, so nitrogen, forms of nitrogen discharging to water, 6 exceedances of the E. coli limits to when we're discharging to water, and exceeding the hydraulic loading rate for the land discharge activity at Martinborough. So the abatement notice requires South Wairarapa to submit a proposal for corrective actions to bring the plan into compliance by the 1st of December this year, so in 15 days' time.
That's not quite right, Amy. I think you've got to...
So submit the proposal by the 1st of December. Yeah. The proposal will demonstrate how we're going to be compliant, and the solution, I guess the way it's worded is it says cease unauthorised discharges from the treatment plant by the 15th of August, but that's 1 year from the date the abatement notice was issued. So I think we will move on to the next slide. So in terms of the approach to addressing this abatement notice for Martinborough, Wellington Water has advised South Wairarapa of a comprehensive 30-year investment program for the Martinborough treatment plant, which will resolve the abatement notice non-compliance issues. This 30-year investment program is spread out. I mean, it's 30 years worth of work, but it's quite heavily loaded in the first 10 years. And originally that gets us up to stage 2A of the resource consent. And that would address the abatement notice issues within the 10-year period. So we had prepared that plan, we presented it to you at the last CLG, and we were planning quite a decent program of work for the next 10-year period, but then we received this abatement notice, and so South Wairarapa and Wellington Water have been working together to assess which parts of this upgrade program can be brought forward and the effect, the beneficial effect that will have on the treatment plant performance and compliance. That obviously has to, South Wairarapa has some budgetary constraints that they need to work in with. So I suppose I could leave that up to South Wairarapa to comment on that, but that part of it, the constraints and difficulty there, but the next step is to submit this agreed action plan to Greater Wellington on the 1st of December. And I think, just for context for everyone, to address the abatement notice and to the level of work required to fix these compliance issues by 15th of August 2023 is extremely challenging for just simply the amount of work to do. If budget wasn't a constraint, even the amount of work that we have to do within 1 year is really, really difficult, probably impossible. But we're working on a program that, you know, has the biggest improvement and biggest effect in the shortest amount of time, obviously, to reduce the effect on the environment. Has anyone got any?
I mean, I guess it'd be interesting to hear at this point from Ben or Aaron or Stefan in any particular order.
Well, GWRC doesn't have much comment to make. Obviously, some of the information we just saw on the previous slide is a latest update, and we would need to discuss with Wellington Water and SWDC, not in this forum, about what that means and the implications of that.
For sure.
I wondered if everybody who's here tonight understands what an abatement notice is, and if anybody's curious about that, I'm happy to explain what that means and how they work.
Could you add that in now, Ben? That'd be really helpful. Yeah,
so there's an abatement notice is a legal document that's issued by us as a regulator. They basically come in two forms. The first type is a cease abatement notice, which is where we as the regulator are telling somebody not to do something anymore, which is the case with Martinborough. The other type is a to-do abatement notice, where we ask somebody to do something. This abatement notice has been issued in two parts. The first part is not legally binding. It's the part where we've asked for a plan as to how the plant can be brought back into compliance by the 1st of December. The second part is legally binding, that we've asked the plant to be compliant by August 2023. There are consequences to not meeting the abatement notice. We always take a view on this, though, and obviously we want to continue to talk to people and work together with them as much as possible. So we're hoping, basically, it looks like a lot of work's been done. Looking forward to having some more private chats about what all of this means, what the plan is, and hopefully we can find a way of moving forward that brings the plant into the standard of compliance that basically, as a regulator, we need to see.
Thank you. Yes, it sounds it'd be interesting, I guess, to update on that in the next CLG meeting early next year, once all the parties have had a chance to kind of digest that and exchange ideas and progress the plan. And that's our role, really, is just being kept informed. Are there any other questions or comments on the before we move on to the irrigation season update?
Sorry.
Yes, no.
Sorry, I was just, because we've sort of moved the slide over to the irrigation season, and the cease and desist notice that was at Martinborough about exceeding a hydraulic. Is that around irrigation, or is that around the treatment before it's been discharged, or when it's after it's been discharged?
It's about the application rate that we apply to land at Martinborough. So The consent stipulates a hydraulic loading rate per week of 35 millimeters, sorry. And I guess what we have to do in practice, we have a hard and fast discharge limit. When the river's below a certain limit, where we do not discharge to the river. Often in summer, there's long periods where we can't discharge to the river because of that low flow condition, which is all about protecting the river. And so to operate within the amount, the amount of wastewater that we get into the plant that we have to discharge somewhere, we store as much of it as we safely can in the pond, and then ultimately we operate a higher hydraulic loading rate on that irrigation field there. That has been reviewed by a specialist that was engaged, and they sort of had looked at the data that is available and shows that we're managing to manage that application rate. But I guess that's part of our response to this abatement notice will be probably to try and formalise that application strategy that we have there to manage the wastewater that Martinborough has. Yeah.
Mel, does that clarify kind of your question around how that is the discharges happening in terms of difference between irrigation and loading? Cool, thank you. Thanks, Amy. Any other questions before we move on? All right, thank you. We might move to the next slide and get an update on the 22-23 irrigation season.
Yeah, so in a piece of good news, so you'll remember that at Greytown, from the last CLG maybe, we share the field there with a gliding club and also a grazer who leases a patch of land there as well. So we held a pre-season meeting in September with those two parties, and it was really productive. So we got some improvements in our operating strategy from last year. So we've had an agreement with them to operate the irrigator during one day a week. So the other times we have to irrigate at night, which isn't so as good as irrigating during the day. So we've got this agreement for this coming season to irrigate every Tuesday, apart from 1 or 2 weeks where they've got sort of week-long events held, which is really great. And also we're going to try and progress a trial to operate the irrigator a bit differently, with parking it at the southern end of the pivot. So that's all about optimizing our irrigation activity and the longevity of the field. So yeah, that was pretty good, and we commenced irrigation on the 25th of October at Martinborough. The river was the first time the river had got below its low flow limit, and so we've been using it periodically on and off since that time. We actually started irrigating at Greytown today. We did our first day run, and I believe that went well. Maybe Martin can tell us if anything went wrong there, but haven't heard. So
pleased to confirm that the day run at Greytown went pretty well.
Awesome.
So looking forward to more runs.
Yeah, great.
Any questions from around the group regarding the irrigation season commencing? Adam?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I just wanted to also just acknowledge Sarah at South Wairarapa District Council, one of the land advisors. She was, I guess, really helpful in this and setting up and coordinating those meetings with the gliding club and the grazer. She was very helpful in getting everyone in a room, and we could just discuss the irrigation season. And I think it was she was instrumental in helping to set up those productive meetings. So I just wanted to acknowledge Sarah at the council.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Stefan's just noting that he's going to pass that feedback on. So that's great. Thanks, Adam.
Andrew, I'm just thinking around the irrigation, just if there's any more context that might be useful, Amy, particularly for the Louise and who's coming into her new role, and I guess this is all around optimal use, isn't it? It says quite a lot of balancing around, particularly the gliding club with training days and all sorts of stuff going on, and so it's really a balancing act, isn't it? And so the more we're in conversation with these people and the communications are sharp, then it just allows us to have that optimal use of the irrigator, and that has positive outcomes as well. Is that a good way of putting it, Amy, in terms of that context?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's tricky to run an irrigation field with other people using it. Yeah.
Right.
Do those successful talks, Amy, with the gliding club, do they enhance the area that you can use? So, or is it the same area?
It's the same area. No, it's just about how we use it. It's whether we can run it during the day, which you get better evapotranspiration, and you can see what's actually happening. You can see how the irrigator's running, and if we can do this optimized mode where we're parking it at the southern end, it means we can discharge the field in a better way that gives us more rest periods between when we irrigate, but we're getting rid of more flow. So yeah, it's just all about optimizing it so that the field lasts as long as possible. It has the best, it's accepting treated wastewater, so it's not like irrigating with plain water. You have to be quite careful how you manage the field so that it doesn't turn nasty or septic, and we're getting the best land treatment as it goes through the field.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. Very good. Amy, do you have anything else you've completed your kind of summary there of the irrigation season? Yeah. Okay. So I guess moving to the next item on the agenda, kind of two similar ones. Really, it was just inviting input from GWRC and then SWDC. So I guess starting with Aaron and Ben, what would you like to add in addition, I guess, to what you've covered already?
I guess I can say a few words. So I think on the whole, despite the limitations of the plant and the non-compliances, we've been quite happy with Wellington Water's efforts this year. They've kept in good communication, and I think they're managing the plants to the best of their ability. So yeah, in terms of that annual reports, we have sent that for an expert assessment on some of the more technical conditions, and we're just waiting to hear back on that. So we'll probably have a finalized report in, I would guess, about 6 weeks, something like that, maybe in time to share the results of that at the next CLG. But yeah, at this stage, not much to report on that. And other than that, yeah, no, don't really have much else to add.
I think that's really helpful, that broad context. That's good. All right, so I guess moving to you, Stefan, in terms of input from SWDC. Maybe just before that, Stefan, a quick question from
Sorry,
Lorraine.
I had my raised hand, but it's not visible on my background. Sorry, just taking it one back. You've mentioned there was an abatement notice issued against the Martinborough treatment plant, but you haven't mentioned anything with Greytown. Does that mean there hasn't been any issue and it's compliant, or has it not? I just was curious in comparison.
Yeah, so in terms of the Greytown plant, the level of non-compliance is, in our opinion, significantly less as far as where we've gotten to with that, with the previous reports, and we feel that that plant is running more optimally than Martinborough. So yeah, no, an abatement notice hasn't been considered necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, great question. Any other questions to Aaron or Ben before we move to Stefan.
So do you mind if I just jump in there? So just for your clarity, Louise, is it? Yeah, sorry, I can't see your name right now, but there's so in terms of the work required for these plants, there is still a significant program of work required at Greytown that we have and defined to just that needs to be done at the plant. So although there's no abatement notice, yeah, you will probably see that as there is a lot of work required. Yeah.
Thank you. I think when I get the reports.
Cool.
Right, thanks, Amy. Yeah, that's good clarity. Okay, so Stefan, input from you from the South Wairarapa District Council perspective.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Chair. There's not really a lot more to say. I mean, I think the council's happy with the advice we're getting from Wellington Water on options to address the most immediate concerns in relation to the Martinborough plant. You know, we need a plan that allows us to most efficiently use the funding, the limited funding that we have available, and that allows us to, if necessary, go back to council and to ask ratepayers for more in order to solve an urgent problem that needs resolution. So, you know, Wellington Water has been providing us with good quality information, and our job is to work with them, work with the regulator. You know, the most important thing there is to just have good quality regular communication about what we're doing, how hard we're working to achieve compliance as fast as we can within the constraints that we face. So I think that all parties are making their best effort and talking to one another in the way they should be. It's challenging. It's a challenging environment. These plants are in need of major investment, and it's extremely expensive. Even a single item like desludging of a pond is $1.5 million. And for a council that you know, $200,000 is 1% of rates, even that one item is a very significant investment for the 8,000 or so people that are paying rates in our region. So, you know, we do absolutely want to reach solutions, but they'll need to be in a staged, phased way that makes sense, that's acceptable to the regulator, that ratepayers can hold our breath for free water reform. Thanks.
Thank you for those comments, Stefan. Any questions back to Stefan from the group in terms of clarifying the district council perspective? Thank you. I think it's been it's actually really interesting to see the CLG operating in this manner with, you know, these issues within this part of the public arena, but yet while still being respectful of the higher level conversations that need to happen for kind of constructive exploration of, you know, options and opportunities going forward. And I think it'd be really interesting again to have this as a medium to update on those discussions and the plans, and to kind of share. It's really helpful here having the layers of key parties are able to comment even broadly to give it some perspective, because otherwise the information in isolation is very thin and lacking perspective. So I think that perspective broadly is really helpful, even while being respectful of the importance of higher level discussions. So I think that it feels quite a good balance there. But I would, I think that said, is really important that that we do have fairly good representation here within the CLG. Going back to Mel's comment at the start, you know, that key parties are here, including iwi especially, but not just the kind of mainstream organisations, so that it does function at that level and keep everyone in the broad conversation. Got a comment from Robin there.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to mention that, and not that I want to debate Three Waters reform in this environment, but my role is to manage the transition for South Wairepa District Council, and maybe something for future agendas is that we are working very closely with Wellington Water to ensure that as we progress through water reform, if we progress through water reform, that we ensure that that projects that have been initiated continue to maintain momentum, and also that if water reform goes ahead, that any investment plans considered by these new entities do factor in these very important strategic projects going forward. So that is something else that we're working very closely together that I just wanted to point out.
Yeah, thank you. That's an important point. I guess adding to your comment around future agenda items, be interesting to hear at this point, other than I guess what's already kind of teed up in the pipeline, is there any suggestions people in this group would have of what they'd like to see on a future agenda of a CLG in the new year? And I guess if members of this group did have thoughts, Rory, would it be okay if they forwarded those through to you as suggestions? It's still
yeah, absolutely. No, a couple of good suggestions there, and of course there's always the possibility of face-to-face meetings, something we're working towards as well, so next year. So yeah, any suggestions, just fire it through to me. Yeah.
And I think broadly, in terms of just people reflecting on this meeting and its purpose and thinking, you know, what if anything would you add or tweak to improve the value of it for, you know, for your time and the communities that you all represent as well, or organisations. Very good. Any closing comments from you, Rory?
No, I think pretty much everyone summed it up there. Some really good comments. I've just jotted down what Mel mentioned earlier about the mana whenua engagement, just looking into how we can, you know, feedback this kind of information back into, you know, the community, and also the really useful links that we shared. You know, the good opportunity to share that with CLG members, even the ones that haven't been able to make tonight. So, but no, some really useful comments, and really like the wider context around the reality of a smaller, you know, ratepayer base and what that means in terms of, you know, making challenging decisions on funding. So some really good context there, and also the operations of the plant as well from Amy. So no, that's really good. I'm happy with that, Andrew.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's a really constructive meeting, and look forward to meeting again in the new year. I'd like to pass back over to Adam to close the CLG with a closing karakia.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew, Chair. Unohia, unohia, unohia I te uru tapu nui, kia watea kia mama te nā kau, te tinana te wairua I te ara te kautū, koia ra I rongo whakairihia Aki ki runga, kia watea, kia watea, ai rā kua watea. Thanks.
Well, right. Thank you, everyone. We'll close the meeting and look forward to seeing everyone in the new year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ben, Aaron. Cheers.